welcome to FrontLine. This is Colonel David Giammona on the Battle Ready channel and now on Roku TV's Remnant with Pastor Todd Coconato. We'd like you to subscribe to FrontLine on YouTube on the Battle Ready Network. And now go to our website also, www.battle-ready.org. There you can subscribe to our newsletter, go shopping for cool Battle Ready stuff, and join us in all our video and presentations and watch our shows. Joining me today is our co-host and Pulitzer Prize nominated investigative journalist, Troy Anderson. Troy, good to have you on the show today, man.
Colonel, it's a great honor to be here.
Well, we're having a great show here today, Troy. We have the president and CEO of the National Religious Broadcasters, Troy Miller. Troy is a senior executive with more than 30 years of management and business experience, who was elected as president and CEO of NRB in July 2022. He also served as the interim CEO of NRB since March of 2009. Troy is a mover and shaker in the media industry. Great leadership, and he has brought the association a recaptured strong financial position, grown its membership, and enhanced its programming, network, sponsorship, and aspects of the annual International Christian Media Convention, which we're going to talk about. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I was there for the first time. I became a member of the NRB, and it is a tremendous exhibition of what's going to go on in May 22nd to 25th in Orlando. We're going to talk about that. But Troy, man, it's great to have you on the show.
Hey, it's great to be with you today. Thank you for having me.
I noticed that you were a Navy man. I was an Army myself for 32 years and just got out about 4 years ago. Tell us a little bit about your Navy experience. That'd be interesting for everybody to hear about.
Sure. I love my Navy experience. I was a sailor for 6 years. I actually had a number of really neat things that I was able to do. I was one of the first sailors to learn about the vertical launch missile system that was put into the Aegis cruisers. I also commissioned an Aegis cruiser, the USS Bunker Hill, down in Pascagoula, Mississippi. We were commissioned up in Boston, Massachusetts. So I did a 7-month stint in 1987. If you remember when Iran lined the Persian Gulf with Silkworm missiles and said, hey, we're going to shut down shipping, the Navy put together a battle group with the USS Missouri. That historic battleship was the flagship, and we did the first 7-8 months of tanker escorts in and out of the Persian Gulf to keep oil flowing for not only the U.S., but for the world. So I just really preciously value my time in the service. Plus, that's when my grandmother knew she had a captive sailor, and she sent me Dr. D. James Kennedy's book, Why I Believe, and that led me to Christ. So just a wonderful experience serving our country.
Amen, brother. Well, we're glad you're serving Christ, because without that, I don't think you would be the president of the NRB.
Right.
And we're going to get down and talk about that and why it's important for our listeners to understand what you are doing. But before we get into that, talk a little bit about the convention. I know Troy and I are very excited about being there and being part of what's going on. But tell us what this convention is all about and what does it really mean to you, and what are your expectations out of it?
Yeah, sure. Briefly, just for your audience, NRB, the National Religious Broadcasters Association, has been around 79 years now. Started back in 1944 when there was a threat to take pastors off of the radio. And NRB, a group met in Moody Church in Chicago. They formed NRB. NRB has been advocating on behalf of Christian broadcasters, and now today, Christian communicators. And the NRB convention, which will be in May in Orlando, Florida, May 22nd through the 25th at the Orlando World Center, it is the premier gathering of Christian communicators. So if you're in Christian broadcasting, if you're radio, television, film, if you're a broadcaster, if you're a programmer for radio, television, or film, if you're a podcaster, if you're a blogger, if you're an author, a book publisher, whatever the area might be, and tons of churches today, everybody is into streaming their church services and streaming other educational things that come out of churches. NRB is the place to be. It's the largest gathering. We'll have nearly 4,000 people down there in Orlando. We have an exhibit floor of over 160 exhibitors that will be there to help ministries and organizations to better their communication skills, to broaden your networking. We have sponsors, and then we have sessions going all week. We'll cover some of the leading topics and the most critical topics that are going on in the culture today. We'll talk about the gender confusion. We'll talk about the cancel culture. We'll talk about how Christians are seen in the media. We'll talk about what it looks like in a post-Roe world today. So just a number of topics plus workshops. It's just a great time to get together. If you have any area of Christian communications, or if you're just generally concerned about what's going on in our country today, NRB Convention is the place to be.
Oh, it really is. First time I attended last year in Nashville, and I connected with so many of our friends, and we were on so many shows. I wasn't broadcasting then, but was able to connect with Todd Starnes, Eric Texas, and both those gentlemen have been on my show. So all the connectivity I did there was really a beneficial scenario for us for the rest of the year. And again, we look forward to it again. Troy, before I get over to you, let me ask Troy Miller. There's two Troys on the show today. Yeah. So let me ask Troy Miller one other question. So you're talking about this, the convention, but what are your expectations this year? What do you want to see happen that would say, yeah, this is really going to check the block for me and these areas? What would those be?
Well, look, the theme of the convention this year is to stand fast. We have so many people in the Christian community, unfortunately, that are either walking away from the faith or walking away from the orthodoxy of the faith. And what we really are trying to accomplish is that pastors and ministries, with all of the opposition that's going on, will stand fast for the gospel. And it's really all about the proclamation of the gospel. And so we're really hoping for that unity to come out of this, a real united front across the community of Christian communicators, Christian broadcasters, that there's a real stand fast against the direction that the culture is going today, and not to shy away from the gospel. People need hope. They need to know that there's a place they can go to. They need to know that God loves them, and that this is not the answer, what they're hearing in the secular world today. And that's what we're really hoping out of the convention, as well, to see many more ministries launch. I think we want to see more people in Christian communications and not less.
Troy Anderson, your thoughts, brother?
Troy, I've been a journalist for 3 decades. I was a reporter at the LA Daily News for many years. Can you talk about the challenges that Christian journalists are facing today? And can you talk about these two separate worlds of media now? You've got the secular media, and you've got Christian and conservative media, and the kind of messages that our people are hearing from these two different sources.
Yeah, it's really the clash of two different worldviews. As you said, you have the secular legacy media, the mainstream media, we often call it today. And really, if you've been watching any of the things that go on the mainstream media today, seems more and more just a propaganda arm for the left, sort of progressionist, liberal agendas that are out there. And they seem to have, it's interesting, they seem to have all the platforms, seem to have the loudest voice, but if you look at the numbers, nobody's listening. It's really interesting. There's some of the lowest rated networks, the mainstream television networks, the different blog sites and things are lowest rated. And then, as you said, you contrast that to what's going on in the Christian media and the Christian conservative media in particular. And every obstacle and roadblock that can be thrown at the Christian media is really out there. We've seen a number, if not all of our members that are in journalism that are traditional media kind of members, all of them have been canceled in one platform or another, either in total cancellation off of YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, or they've had stories canceled on those platforms. So there's a lot they're facing there. They've had folks go after their advertising, go after platforms to deplatform them. And so there's a real concerted effort to silence the Christian journalism today and what's going on. They're really afraid of the truth, and this is not made up. This is not hyperbole. We're not trying to sort of scare people. This is not about fear mongering. Just look out there. It's real. All of these platforms have really shut the voices down. So it's a concerted effort.
Yeah, Troy and I have been on numerous interviews across the land, around the world, and we have seen it firsthand. Interesting enough, Australia really has taken a beating in the media, and we saw that, Troy. Last year, we were on 700 stations in Australia speaking at one show, and they were very frightened of what the future held for their media and all the things that were going on. Very interesting. And so we have an explosion going on right now in some venues. For example, I just went to see Jesus Revolution, and it is really just way above expectations for Hollywood. I was actually in that movement. I was saved in the Jesus movement in California many moons ago, and I actually knew Chuck Smith, not as a friend, but I was a musician at the time. Was with Randy Stonehill, and we would do concerts down there, and we got to pray with him and see firsthand what was going on in Calvary Chapel. So very exciting. And then he'd come up to Sacramento as well. But to see Greg Laurie and the crew do this, along with the Chosen and other things, at the same time, revival breaking out across our nation and schools. Troy, what do you make of all that?
Hey, when it gets the darkest, the light shines the brightest. God's not done yet with this country. He's certainly not done with his church, as some people would like to portray. I think it's great. I think John Irwin and the folks over at Kingdom did just a fabulous job. My wife and I went and saw that on its opening night. What a great movie! What a great production values that they produced there. Great characters. Everybody should go see it. There's just a number of things that are going on in this space that people are waking up to, and I think it's also a bit of the pushback of what we're seeing in the secular world. The secular world is constantly bringing doom and gloom and despair upon people. And again, people really want hope. They're looking for hope. I'm really excited about, I hope the revivals that are going on across many of the Christian campuses today really take hold. It's great to see that the folks in Gen Z are getting excited about glorifying the Lord. They're getting excited about following Jesus. If we look at the revivals of past, that should bleed over, and we should start to see a real change in the culture. So I think all of us as Christians should be in prayer for that again, there are more people going into media today than less, and we just want to see more programming like this produced.
Troy, I was going to tell you before the show, and I forgot about this, but I would even be prepared. God may even break out at the NRB this year. So I hope you guys are ready, because that's what we're praying.
Well, we're certainly praying for that as well. And again, like I said, we're really praying for that spirit of unity across the church. NRB has people representing many different denominations and different sort of theological views. But the central thing about NRB is about the gospel. And at least the last couple of years, that's one of the things that's really warmed my heart, is to hear people that go to NRB and say, you know what, I learned this about broadcasting or that about my production. But what I really mattered to me was the group that got around me and prayed for me, the group that I got together and prayed for the country, the renewal in my spirit to work on behalf of where God's called me. That's really what matters.
I was actually love what you're saying, because as an Army chaplain, I was in the Army for 32 years. I got to minister and work with a lot of different denominations and chaplains, and I see the NRB as the same kind of venue. So it's really exciting for me, from my vantage point, to see what you guys are doing. And I worked with Catholic priests, Baptists, Presbyterians, Methodists, you name it, and it was real exciting. Hey, Troy Anderson, going back to you, and I'm saying Troy Anderson on purpose because I don't want to confuse Troy Miller. Troy, your follow-up question, brother.
Yeah, Troy. Recently, Anne Graham Lotz came out and said that could this be the last great awakening with this thing with the Asbury revival? Now people inspired by the Jesus Revolution. What kind of role do you think that Christian media is going to play? I mean, we have this unprecedented opportunity today to spread the gospel to billions of people around the world. What role do you think media and entertainment, Christian entertainment, is going to play as this moves ahead in the months and years to come?
Oh, I think they're going to play a key role. If you look at some of the numbers like I follow all the time, and the consumption that just the general public has of media in general, that consumption has continually sort of crept up. So the number of hours that people consume media, whether it's traditional media, broadcast media, or whether it's new digital media, has grown. So media is going to play a really big role in that. We estimate that NRB members reach about 190 million households across this country. That's most of the households in the U.S. market. So in some form, Christian media is available out there, whether it's radio, television, or just the many now outlets of digital media, like you guys are on Roku and a number of platforms. So I think that's going to play a key role. Again, we see viewership and listenership going up. People are hurting. People are looking for the truth. They're looking for answers. And so Christian media is going to play that role. Again, filmmaking, people are looking for good, wholesome, not only entertainment, but things that really warm your soul, things that make you feel proud to be a human and to live in this society. And I think that's what the Christian worldview brings. It's that kind of hope. So we're hoping, and again, talk about the convention a little bit, that we see more and more people getting into media and doing this. We're really excited on some of the young filmmakers out there are doing some tremendous work. There are some fabulous documentaries out there now that really go back and look at Bible archaeology, look at the church history, and really tell the truth of the story out there of how the message of Jesus Christ and the gospel has impacted the world for good.
Yeah, we have some great film producers and directors. In fact, one of the great guys, directors and producers, is on our board of Battle Ready. And Jim Ellis out in San Diego has his own studios and does a tremendous job. And actually, we were going to have John Irwin on the show this week, but you know how things go. We're going to reschedule that. But the fact is, I think you're exactly right, Troy, that there's an explosion that is mushrooming, like a nuclear blast. And I think it's going to hit in all phases of our culture. And interesting enough, AOC this week was talking about the ads on the Super Bowl. He gets us. And she said, she was going to do all she can to get that off the air and do all she can. And it's impacting at the highest levels. That's all I'm trying to say. And it's going to be interesting in the future what's actually going to happen. To change it a little bit, you're familiar with the Global Disinformation Index, correct, Troy?
Correct. Yes.
A British group with U.S. affiliates. The core product, GDI, provides its clients a dynamic exclusion list, ranking websites and news organizations by risks that companies can consult to steer clear of websites deemed high risk by GDI. You've been knee deep in this, Troy, and you've been fighting this, and you've had some success. Tell us about what GDI is all about and what is going on here that we need to know about.
Well, it's another one of these things that sounds really sort of innocuous, sounds like a great idea on the surface. We need to understand that the information that we're getting is factual and based, and that we're, sort of getting the truth. But when you start to pull back the covers on these organizations, you find out that that's really not the case. The real case is, how do we control the messaging? How do we control what's going on out there, especially in the digital platform where anybody can get on and start talking about topics or opinions or things. So these folks, the GDI, they get a lot of their money. We're finding out now is funneled through nonprofits, which actually get their money from government grants. So again, we see this continued sort of like weaponizing government, weaponizing censorship through these third-party players. And so I think you saw we wrote an article on it out there. When you start to look at it, the people that they're saying, hey, these organizations have high risk for the information they're giving you, amazingly, they're all conservative organizations, and many of them are Christian conservative organizations. So how is it that suddenly that the conservative side of journalism is the highest risk out there, and that the liberal side of journalism isn't? So it's a continuation of this weaponizing and trying to censor out and control the messaging, and control it with now this facade of, oh, we're helping you out with what are the risks.
So if I could go deeper with this topic, what have you been able to do as the president and CEO of NRB and your team to combat this? Have you been working with Congress and politically and advertisers and all that? What kind of inroads have you made against this?
Yeah, well, we have been working with Congress very closely. We're one of the catalysts behind pushing for the hearings that are now underway in Congress. You've seen the last few weeks, the House Oversight Committee has started to hold hearings on this, on the Twitter files, and on some of the collusion between the government entities here in the U.S. and the social media companies. And we're really going to keep that pressure up. We don't want that to stop just at Twitter. Elon Musk dumped his infamous now Twitter files, all this information that really showed the collusion, the collaboration that was going on between the government and these social entities. We think that we want to see what was going on at Alphabet. What was Google doing? What has Google been censoring? Because those search engines are really critical to how people find information on the internet. So what has Google been doing? What's their role? What is the government? Has the government's role been in that? And the same thing with Meta and Facebook. We're gonna push so this goes beyond that. The other thing we're doing is we're starting to work now. We have Mike Ferris is our new general counsel. We're starting to work more closely on a project that we're going to be interfacing directly with the boardrooms. It's the boardrooms and the C-suites today that are really buying into this, and they're buying into it because they're getting what they think is perceived pressure from the left, but there's really not a counter argument from the right. One of my background, I spent 11 years in the tech industry. So I worked in the Silicon Valley for Gateway. I headed global IT for them. So I understand how the corporate boardrooms work. And a lot of these folks just need to hear the message that's going on, that conservatives and conservative Christians aren't the enemy out there. And as a matter of fact, they're the larger number of your consumers and your constituents that you're trying to reach, and you're really alienating them. So we're going to work hard to interface with the C-suites and the boardrooms. That's really one of our upcoming pushes.
Yeah. Amen, brother. That's great. Troy Anderson, your thoughts, man.
Troy, I've been in, as a journalist, investigative journalist, trying to expose the real truth about what's really going on in government and politics and society. We've written, several books on these topics, and I've seen this gigantic change over the last 3 decades. I mean, the media's always been liberal, but now there's so much government involvement in disinformation and propaganda. How extensive is the amount of government backing of these disinformation campaigns now, and why are they doing this?
Well, I don't know that we have the answer to how extensive it is. I think we can look at the Twitter files and some of the things that were going on. I saw some of the testimony yesterday about this. I think it's widely happening across all platforms, not just the mainstream media. As you said, we know the mainstream media has been liberal for a long time, but especially the switch in the business world. That's really the kind of scary part. And what's going on in Silicon Valley. I worked in that industry through the 80s and through the 90s. And at a time, Silicon Valley was all about solving business problems or solving personal computing problems or things. And that was kind of the focus of business. Now, Silicon Valley has really changed, and there's a more of what I'll call a tech religion going on out there. If you look at the leaders today, especially at Alphabet, over at Google, if you look at some of the things of the folks that are writing there, and Facebook, you'll find out that these folks really think that technology is going to solve all of the social sort of moral ills that the world is dealing with today. They really believe that if they can just control the information that people get, if they can make sure people understand the right information about different groups or different topics or different ideologies or whatever, then that is going to change society. So it's like Silicon Valley has become a new religion, and the religion is technology, and the priest are all these algorithms and AI that they're setting up to control the messaging. So you match that then with the left side of the government that doesn't seem to know any end to a power grab. The elites in the liberal have always thought that the thinking there has always been, I know what's better for you than you do, and therefore I should be able to force you to do what I think is better for you. That's really the crux of the elitist kind of liberal thinking. And you match that up with Silicon Valley and some of the AI technology today, and that's really scary that we're moving into that Orwellian sort of world where they want to control all the messaging. And not only that, I saw recently some things over in Europe now where they want to become the thought police and stop you from even, don't think this way. So it's widespread, and it's really, really disturbing.
We're going to explore that in part 2 of this series that we're talking to the NRB president of Troy Miller. And Troy, thanks for being on the show today. We're going to end our segment. Just a comment on what you said. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had Eric Metaxas on the show, and he's exactly what you're talking about on his new book, The Letter to the American Church. And we did 2 segments with him, and he really just laid out all the things that are paralleling what's going on in Nazi Germany back in the 30s and what's going on in the United States of America now. And if we don't have this revival, if we don't have an awakening, we're doomed. So it's not all gloom and doom, but God has his hand in everything. So we're excited. And we're going to explore a lot more of that in just a few moments. But Troy, before we end, where can people get a hold of you, maybe ask you questions, or what things that you want to highlight so our producer and editor can show that on our screen?
Yeah, our website is a great resource. It's www.nrb.org. So go to nrb.org. You'll see we write about a number of the topics we're discussing today. We have a whole policy section. We keep track of what's going on policy-wise, either in both legislation and the regulatory side. And then we talk about what's going on in the culture. You can send emails to us at info@nrb.org. That's a great way to reach out to us as well. And then the convention website is nrbconvention.org, and you can find out all about the convention.
Well, I really encourage people to go to this convention if all possible. Check out the website. Troy, thank you for being on the show today. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for part 2. But first, I have a question for everybody. Are you battle ready?